In the opening days of World War II, the Polish Air Force fought desperately to reclaim their skies from the Luftwaffe. Their frontline fighter aircraft, the PZL P.11, had once shown the way forward for fighter plane design, but by 1939 it was outnumbered, outgunned and outmoded. This is the story of the P.11, from its conception as one of the world's most advanced fighters to its downfall at the start of World War II. Throughout history, some machines are regarded as great. Their pioneering innovation, groundbreaking performance, market-leading success or battlefield glory have made them legends, and they have gone on to be enshrined in the history books. This is not their story. These, instead, are the stories of the forgotten many. The failed designs, sales flops and occasional unsung heroes that have become the yardstick against which the legends are compared. Yet they deserve to be so much more than that, for in their own unique way, they are parts of history. Let's start the P.11 story by going back 11 years before the invasion of Poland, back to 1928, when PZL, Poland's state-owned aircraft manufacturer, was founded. Initially, the company produced a French fighter plane, the WWII 70, under license, but they soon began work on their own designs. Zygmunt Pawlowski, one of PZL's most skilled designers, led a team to design the P1, which was a prototype for a future Polish Air Force fighter. Although the P1 never entered production, the success of its advanced design encouraged Pawlowski to continue refining it. On the orders of the Polish government, his next design, the P6, was powered by a radial engine. As Poland already had a license to produce Bristol radials, and the government preferred using the locally available power plants to purchasing inline engines from another country. The P6 was the prototype for the P7, which won orders from the Polish Air Force and entered service in 1932. However, PZL and Pawlowski felt that they could do even better, and while the P7 was still being tested, they commenced work on an upgraded version with a more powerful engine and better overall performance. This, the PZL P.11, was the result of their efforts. Unsurprisingly, its design owes a lot to Pawlowski's earlier works, particularly the distinctive gull wing, nicknamed the Pawlowski wing after its appearance on his earlier designs. The wing was mounted high on the fuselage, which eliminated the obstruction to the pilot's view caused by the support structures and bracing of the high-mounted parasol wings then common on monoplane fighters. It was made of aluminium and utilised stressed skin construction, which kept weight down and reduced the need for drag-producing external bracing. Although the wing design was probably the most visible innovation on the P.11, its design incorporated several other advancements that made it one of the most high-tech fighters in the world when it first flew in 1929. Among these were the metal airframe, which, like the wing, featured a stressed skin semi-monocoque construction that made it strong and light, and allowed for the inclusion of numerous maintenance hatches. The fuel tank was mounted in the fuselage just in front of the pilot, and, unusually, could be ejected from the plane in the event of an emergency. While the P.11 showed several advances in aircraft construction, it still had some features that were very much of its time. The undercarriage, for instance, was fixed in place. The propeller was made of fixed-pitch wooden blades. The cockpit was open on all but the last variant of the aircraft, and many P.11s didn't even come with radios. And of course, there was the big, draggy radial hanging out the front, seen as old-fashioned as aircraft manufacturers started to favour thinner, more aerodynamic inline power plants. Pawlowski himself wanted to use an inline engine for his designs, and did so on the prototype P8 and P9. However, as previously mentioned, radial engines were chosen for political reasons, as Polish Skoda Works had a license to produce Bristol Mercury, and IAR of Romania, who built P.11s for their country's air force, produced the Gnome Rhone 9K. Despite that, the P.11 was so well designed that it was able to outpace several of its inline-engined contemporaries, such as the Heinkel 51 and the Hawker Fury. The first P.11s were armed with two Polish-made WZ-33 machine guns mounted on the fuselage, which were synchronised to fire through the propeller arc. From the P.11C onwards, this armament was supported by two more wing-mounted machine guns, and the P.11F and G variants incorporated more powerful FN Browning and WZ-36 guns, albeit with the same 7.62mm calibre. In addition, variants from the P.11C onwards could carry four 12.5kg bombs. The prototype P.11, the P.11-1, flew in August 1931, 2 years after PZL began work on the design. Sadly, chief designer Zygmunt Pulowski didn't live to see the ultimate incarnation of his dream fighter take flight, as he had been killed testing a flying boat in March that year. The P.11-1 was powered by a Bristol Jupiter radial engine, the same engine used in the earlier P7, but the subsequent prototypes were fitted with the larger Mercury units intended for the production aircraft. The prototype aircraft were used to refine various aspects of the design, such as propeller and engine configuration, between the first flight and the P.11's introduction to service in 1934. Unusually, two variants of the P.11 entered service at almost the same time: the P.11A, destined for the Polish Air Force, and the P.11B, which was purchased by Romania. Apart from different engines, the two aircraft were basically identical, and interestingly enough, broadly similar to the P7, which was already in service. The P.11A was intended to be an interim design, bridging the gap between the P7 and future variants, such as the P.11C, which was already under development. Nevertheless, the P.11 was regarded as a technical marvel at the time. Although other monoplanes, such as the French D371 and American P-26, had recently entered service, most air forces, including the neighbouring countries of Czechoslovakia and the Soviet Union, still relied on biplane fighters, such as the Avia B-534 and Polikarpov I-15 respectively. The Polish Air Force eagerly displayed the P-11's high performance and advanced features at international exhibitions and air shows, generating a great deal of pride within Poland and quite a bit of attention from other countries. After completing 50 P-11As, PZL moved on to the upgraded P-11C model, which entered service in 1935 and featured a more powerful Mercury Mark V engine, along with airframe refinements that improved the aircraft's structure and pilot visibility. This would be the most produced P-11 variant, with around 184 being built for the Polish Air Force. As a result of the P-11's growing international reputation, PZL, who'd already managed to sell 49 P-11Bs to Romania, began planning an export variant. Due to license restrictions on the P-11's engine, the export version was fitted with a French radial, a Gnome Rhone Mistral. It also included over 150 other changes, both major and minor, such as a fully enclosed cockpit and heavier armament, to the extent that it was redesignated the P-24 when it entered production in 1936. The P-24 was, in several aspects of its performance, superior to the P-11C, with the Mistral engine developing more power and the airframe being slightly more streamlined. It entered service with the air forces of Romania, Bulgaria, Greece and Turkey, with the latter nation producing 20 under license in a factory in Kayseri. As for the P-11, it had shown that streamlined monoplane fighters could work, and opened the door to a whole new generation of aircraft. Unfortunately, these new planes, aircraft like the Messerschmitt Bf 109 and Hawker Hurricane, rendered the little P-11 obsolete. Encouraged by the Polish Air Force, PZL began work on a more modern fighter in late 1936. The new plane, which would be designated the P-50, was to enter service in late 1939 or early 1940, with an improved P-11, the P-11G, serving as a stopgap until then. Unfortunately for PZL, Hitler wasn't operating to their schedule. On September the 1st, 1939, the full might of the German military smashed across the Polish border. Spearheading the attack was the Luftwaffe, the modern Nazi air force, which had more than 2,000 highly advanced aircraft at its disposal. Aircraft like the Bf-109 fighter and Do-17 fast bomber. In contrast, Poland only had 800 planes to counter them. The advanced P-50 was still only a prototype, and only a single P-11G had been built. New aircraft, like the MS-406 and Hurricane, had been purchased from France and Britain, but the 140 flight-ready P-11s formed the backbone of Poland's fighter defence. Although the P-11 had better visibility from its open cockpit, and was able to outmaneuver the Germans thanks to its compact airframe and large control surfaces, it was, by this point, vastly outnumbered, outgunned, and outclassed. Unlike the modern aircraft of the invading Luftwaffe, these machines were near the end of their service lives and had suffered extensive wear and tear that had taken the edge off their performance. Only around a third of Poland's P-11 force was fully armed with 4 machine guns, most planes only having 2, and even fewer aircraft were fitted with radios. However, the Polish pilots weren't planning to go down without a fight. Before the invasion, the Polish Air Force's fighters had been redeployed to forward airstrips, with about 40 P-11s protecting Warsaw, and the rest assigned to Polish army groups. Contrary to the myth that Poland's air force was wiped out before it left the ground, most of these aircraft did survive the Luftwaffe's bombing raids, but the widely dispersed fighter squadrons and limited number of planes meant that quite often, only a single flight of 10 aircraft, often fewer, could patrol a sector at any time. The P-11's war began early in the morning of September the 1st, when a pair of P-11s intercepted a group of German light bombers and attack aircraft near Krakow. That engagement gave the P-11 the unfortunate distinction of being the first Allied aircraft to be shot down in World War II, when Captain Mieczysław Medwecki's aircraft was engaged and destroyed by a Junkers 87, piloted by Frank Neubert of Stuka Geschwader II. Around 20 minutes later, the Polish fighter also became the first Allied aircraft of the war to score a kill, when Medwecki's wingman, Ladislau Nice, avenged his squadron leader by damaging a Stuka and shooting down 2 Dornier 17s. Nice was hardly alone in finding success with the P-11. The aircraft was the first mount of many Polish flyers who would later fight in the battles over France and Britain, including ace pilot Stanislaw Skalski. However, their heroics could not lead to victory. The Germans could afford to replace their aircraft and pilots, while the Polish Air Force were rapidly losing their stock of fighters. Despite the bravery of the Polish pilots, many of whom fought until the last round of ammunition or beyond, with some even ramming enemy planes out of desperation, the Air Force was losing the battle of attrition. Just over 2 weeks after that first skirmish over Krakow, only 54 Polish aircraft of any type remained in service, but the P-11s had left their mark. Despite the loss of 100 P-11s, between 110 and 120 German aircraft were shot down by the type. A surprisingly decent performance when you consider that the P-11 was several years older and far slower than the aircraft it was pitted against. As the Wehrmacht rolled towards Warsaw, 36 of the surviving P-11s were evacuated to Romania. 1 went to Hungary and another one to Latvia. The aircraft evacuated to Romania, now battle damaged and well past their prime, were used for training or cannibalised for spares to support the Romanian P-11 fleet. The P-11 that escaped to Hungary was used as a glider tug by the University of Budapest, while the Latvian plane was tested and eventually fell into the hands of the Red Army, who had previously captured 2 P-11s during their invasion of Poland from the east. In all, just 1 P-11 survived the war, and it now sits on display in the Polish Aviation Museum in Krakow. That then is the complicated and somewhat checkered history of the PZL P-11, an aircraft that represented a key phase in the evolution of fighter design and became a symbol of the changes in military aviation during the interwar period. As the saying goes, history is written by the victors, and in the case of the P-11, its legacy was mostly told by the conquering Luftwaffe. Despite its achievements, the P-11 seems to be all but forgotten outside of Poland, and when it is remembered, it's usually as part of the myth that the Polish Air Force went down without a fight. However, the whole story of the P-11 is far greater than a hopeless defeat. It emerged in the early 1930s as one of the most advanced fighter planes in the world, and made its mark on the design of fighter aircraft that followed. When World War II began, although the P-11s weren't able to stop the German invasion, they held their own against the Luftwaffe's latest fighters, and gave a first taste of combat to future Polish aces, who went on to continue the fight against fascism in the air forces of other nations after Poland fell. From Zygmunt Pulowski's concept for a modern fighter in 1928 to the aircraft's last stand in 1939, the P-11 was an influence on European aviation. When it entered service, it showed the way forward in fighter design, attracted interest from and provided inspiration to foreign air forces. When war finally came, its replacement, the P-50, still wasn't ready, so the little fighter and the brave young pilots who flew it took on the might of Hitler's war machine in a desperate, doomed last stand. For its design innovations and wartime service, the PZL P.11 is more than an unsung hero. It's a part of history.
번쩍 세상을 흔들어 Hey, love me